The space station floated like a silver ring among the stars. It was called the Crescent Orbital Academy, and it was the biggest school in the galaxy. Ships came and went from its many docking ports, carrying students and teachers from hundreds of different worlds. Inside one of those small ships, a little girl pressed her face against the window. Her name was Una Park, and she was 7 years old. Her dark hair was tied in two short pigtails, and her eyes were wide with wonder as she watched the station grow larger and larger. "Miss Kira, look, it's so big," Una said. The woman sitting next to her smiled. Kira Moon was 32 years old, with kind eyes and a calm voice. She had been chosen to travel with Una as her guardian and translator. This was an important trip. Una was the first human child ever sent to the Galactic Academy for testing. "Yes, it is very big," Kira said. "Are you nervous?" Una thought about it for a moment, then she shook her head. "No, I'm excited. Do you think they have good puzzles there?" Kira laughed softly. Una loved puzzles more than anything. Back on Earth, she had solved every puzzle book, every game, and every riddle her parents could find. When the Galactic Council asked humanity to send a young representative for their youth assessment program, Una had been chosen because of her unusual talent. The ship docked with a gentle bump. The door opened, and Una stepped out into a wide hallway made of smooth white metal. Strange lights floated in the air, and the walls showed moving pictures of distant planets. Aliens walked past them. Some were tall and thin, some were short and round, some had many arms, some had no arms at all. Una stared at everything with her mouth open. A being approached them. He was very tall, almost 3 meters high. His body was covered in a hard shell, like a beetle. He had two large eyes that seemed to be made of many smaller eyes all put together. His voice came out in clicks and hums, but a small device on his chest turned his words into human speech. "I am Professor Vell," he said. His tone was flat and cold. "I will be conducting the assessment of the human specimen." Kira frowned slightly at the word specimen, but she stayed polite. "Thank you, Professor. This is Una Park." Professor Vell looked down at Una. His many eyes blinked slowly. "This is the one. She is very small and very young. Most species send adolescents or young adults." "Una is our best," Kira said simply. Professor Vell made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was not a kind sound. "We shall see. Humans are a Class 7 civilization. Your species only recently learned to travel between stars. The tests I give are designed for advanced minds. Do not expect much." He turned and walked away. Una had to almost run to keep up with his long legs. They went through many hallways and doors until they reached a large room. The walls were covered with screens and machines. In the center of the room was a single table with a chair. "Sit," Professor Vell said. Una climbed onto the chair. Her feet did not reach the floor. She swung them back and forth while she waited. Other aliens began to enter the room. They stood behind glass windows, watching. Some held devices that recorded everything. Kira stood near the door, her hands folded in front of her. Professor Vell placed something on the table. It was a cube, about the size of Una's fist. It was made of many smaller pieces that could move and rotate. Lights glowed inside it, and strange symbols appeared on each face. "This is a standard logic cube," Professor Vell said. "It tests basic reasoning and spatial thinking. Most species solve it in 40 to 60 minutes. Some never solve it at all. You may begin." He pressed a button on his device to start a timer. Una picked up the cube. She turned it over in her small hands. She looked at the symbols. She tilted her head to one side, then the other. Her fingers began to move. Click, click, click. The pieces of the cube shifted. The lights changed color. The symbols rearranged themselves. Professor Vell watched his timer. 30 seconds passed. 1 minute. Click, click, click. 2 minutes. Una was still moving the pieces. Her face showed no stress, no worry. She looked like she was playing with a simple toy. 3 minutes, 3.5. Click. The cube made a soft chime. All its lights turned golden. The symbols formed a perfect pattern. Yuna set it down on the table. Done, she said. Do you have another one? The room went very quiet. Professor Vel stared at the cube. Then he stared at his timer. Then he stared at Yuna. His compound eyes flickered rapidly. That is not possible, he said. You completed it in 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Yuna shrugged. It was not very hard. The symbols follow a pattern. Once you see the pattern, you just have to match them. Behind the glass windows, the other aliens were whispering to each other. Some were pointing at Yuna. Some were checking their own devices, as if they did not believe what they had just seen. Professor Vel picked up the cube. He examined it carefully. He ran it through a scanner. The scanner confirmed that the puzzle had been solved correctly. There must be an error, he said. Perhaps the cube was damaged. Perhaps it was set to an easier level. It was not, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A new alien had entered the room. She was tall and had blue skin. She had 4 arms and she wore long white robes. Her eyes were silver and they seemed to see everything at once. Director Olmel, Professor Vel said, bowing his head slightly. I did not know you were observing. I observe all new species assessments, Director Olmel said. She walked closer to the table and looked down at Yuna. Hello, little one. That was very impressive. Thank you, Yuna said politely. Can I do another puzzle now? Director Olmel smiled. It was a strange smile with too many teeth, but it seemed friendly. Yes, I think we would all like to see that. Professor Vel did not smile. His eyes were still flickering, and his shell made a clicking sound that Kira thought might mean he was upset. Very well, he said stiffly. We will proceed to the next level of testing, but I assure you, Director, this was merely luck. Humans are not capable of genuine cognitive excellence. It is simply not in their biology. Kira said nothing, but she moved a little closer to Yuna and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Yuna just smiled and swung her feet, waiting for the next puzzle. She had no idea that she was about to turn the entire galactic scientific community upside down. Professor Vel did not sleep that night. His species did not need much sleep anyway, but even by their standards he was restless. He spent hours reviewing the recording of Yuna solving the logic cube. He watched it again and again. He slowed it down. He zoomed in on her hands. He studied her face. There had to be a trick. There had to be some kind of cheat. Humans were a young species. They had only been traveling in space for a few decades. Their brains were small and simple compared to the great minds of the galaxy. A human child could not possibly solve a puzzle that fast. And yet she had. The next morning, Professor Vel prepared new tests. These were not standard tests. These were puzzles from higher difficulty levels, designed for species with thousands of years of mental evolution. He would prove that yesterday was just luck. He would show everyone that humans were exactly what he believed them to be, simple creatures from a primitive world. The testing room was more crowded today. Word had spread through the station about the human girl. Scientists, teachers, and students from many species had gathered to watch. They filled the observation area behind the glass windows. Some floated in the air. Some clung to the walls. All of them wanted to see what would happen next. Yuna walked in holding Kira's hand. She was wearing the same simple dress as yesterday, with small stars printed on it. Her hair was in its usual pigtails. She looked around at all the watching aliens and waved. Hello, she said cheerfully. The aliens did not know how to respond. Some waved back awkwardly, others just stared. Professor Vel was already waiting at the table. His shell seemed darker today and his movements were stiff. Sit down, he said. We will begin immediately. Yuna climbed onto her chair. What puzzles do we have today? Difficult ones, Professor Vel said. He placed a flat device on the table. When he touched it, a glowing pattern appeared in the air above it. The pattern was made of hundreds of shapes in different colors. They moved and changed constantly. This is a pattern recognition matrix, Professor Vell explained. You must identify the underlying logic and predict the next sequence. Most advanced species require 20 to 30 minutes. Some never complete it at all. You may begin. Yuna looked at the floating shapes. She watched them move and change. Her eyes followed their paths. She did not touch anything. She did not speak. She just watched. 1 minute passed. Then Yuna reached out and touched 3 shapes in quick order. The entire pattern froze. Then it shifted, and all the shapes arranged themselves into a perfect spiral. That is the answer, Yuna said. Then she looked at Kira. Miss Kira, can I have a snack after this? I am a little hungry. Of course, Kira said, hiding her smile. Professor Vell stood very still. The observers behind the glass were making excited sounds. He could hear them even through the thick walls. How long? Someone asked. Professor Vell checked his timer. 1 minute and 12 seconds, he said. His voice was flat. Director Omel was watching from a private balcony above the room. She leaned forward, her 4 hands resting on the railing. Her silver eyes never left the little human girl. Continue the testing, Professor, she said. Professor Vell nodded stiffly. He took away the pattern device and placed something new on the table. This time it was a small ball that floated in the air. When Yuna looked at it, it split into many pieces and formed a complex 3-dimensional shape. This is a spatial reasoning hologram, Professor Vell said. You must rotate it mentally and identify which form it will become when collapsed. Most. That one, Yuna said, pointing at a small symbol on the side of the table. It will become that shape. Professor Vell stopped talking. He looked at the symbol she was pointing at. Then he looked at the floating shape. He pressed a button and the pieces collapsed together. They formed exactly the shape Yuna had indicated. I did not finish explaining the rules, Professor Vell said slowly. Oh, sorry, Yuna said. I thought I understood. Was I supposed to wait? No, you were correct. Professor Vell's voice was strange now. Kira could not read alien emotions well, but she thought he sounded confused, maybe even scared. The testing continued. Professor Vell brought out puzzle after puzzle. Each one was harder than the last. Each one was designed for minds far more advanced than a 7-year-old human should have. There was a temporal sequencing problem, where Yuna had to arrange events in the correct order based on limited information. She solved it backward, starting from the end and working toward the beginning. Professor Vell had never seen anyone solve it that way before. He had never even considered that it was possible. There was a multi-dimensional mapping challenge, where shapes existed in 4 dimensions instead of 3. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment, then drew the correct answer in the air with her finger. There was a language pattern test, using symbols from an ancient alien civilization. Yuna did not know the language, but she figured out the grammar rules just by looking at examples. Then she wrote a new sentence that was perfectly correct. Each time Professor Vell expected her to fail. Each time she surprised him. The observers were no longer whispering. They were talking loudly, excitedly. Some were recording everything on their devices. Others were sending messages to their home worlds. This was news. This was big news. After 3 hours of testing, Professor Vell finally stopped. He stood beside the table, his many eyes blinking rapidly. His shell made clicking sounds. Yuna looked up at him. Are there more puzzles? She asked. Not today, Professor Vell said. His voice was quiet. Okay, Yuna hopped down from the chair. Miss Kira, can we get that snack now? All that thinking made me really hungry. Kira laughed softly. Yes, let us find you something to eat. As they walked toward the door, Professor Vell spoke again. Wait. Yuna turned around. Professor Vell looked at her for a long moment. His compound eyes seemed to search for something. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How does your mind work? What is your method?" Yuna thought about the question. She was only 7, so she did not have fancy words to explain. She just said what she felt. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I just look at the puzzle and my brain starts trying things. It is like my head gets excited and starts running around looking for answers. Sometimes I see the answer before I even think about it. Is that strange?" Professor Vell did not answer. He just watched as the small human girl walked away, holding her guardian's hand and talking about what kind of snack she wanted. Later that day, Professor Vell went to Director Omel's office. He stood before her desk, his proud posture now bent with uncertainty. "I do not understand," he admitted. "I have been teaching for 300 years. I have tested thousands of young minds from hundreds of species. I have never seen anything like this." Director Omel nodded slowly. "Neither have I." "There must be some form of external assistance," Professor Vell said. "A neural implant, perhaps, some kind of hidden technology. Humans are a Class 7 civilization. They should not be capable of this." "We scanned her," Director Omel said. "Twice. There is no technology, no implants, no enhancements, just a small human brain inside a small human skull." Professor Vell was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What do we do?" Director Omel stood up, all 4 of her hands folded together. "We test her again tomorrow, but this time we use something special, something from the Forbidden Archive." Professor Vell's shell clicked loudly. "The Forbidden Archive. Those tests were retired. They are too difficult. They have caused psychological damage to adult test takers." "I know," Director Omel said, "but I need to see how far this goes. I need to understand what we are dealing with." She looked out her window at the stars. Humans have only been in space for a short time. If their children can do this, what can their adults do? What will they become in 100 years? 1,000? Professor Vell had no answer. In a small room nearby, Yuna was happily eating a fruit that tasted like strawberries and looked like a small blue cloud. She had no idea what the adults were planning. She was just glad she got to do more puzzles tomorrow. The Forbidden Archive was located deep inside the station. To reach it, you had to pass through 7 locked doors and 3 security checkpoints. Each door required a different code, and only the highest-ranking officials had all 7. Director Omel led the way. Professor Vell walked behind her, his shell still clicking nervously. 2 security guards followed them, their weapons ready even though there was no real danger. The archive was not forbidden because it was deadly. It was forbidden because of what it could do to minds that were not ready. "Are you certain about this?" Professor Vell asked for the 3rd time. "No," Director Omel admitted, "but I must know, we all must know." They reached the final door. It was made of thick black metal, with symbols carved into its surface. Director Omel pressed her palm against a panel, and the door slid open with a heavy sound. Inside was a small room. The walls were lined with containers, each one holding a different test. Some tests were physical objects. Others were data files. Some were so old that no one remembered who had created them. Director Omel walked to a specific container. She opened it carefully and removed a small crystal disc. The disc glowed with a soft red light. "The infinite loop," she said. "This puzzle was created 300 years ago by the greatest puzzle designer who ever lived. It was retired after it caused 3 test takers to suffer mental breakdowns. No one has been allowed to attempt it for over a century." Professor Vell's eyes flickered rapidly. "And you want to give this to a 7-year-old human child?" "I want to see what happens," Director Omel said. "We will watch carefully. If she shows any sign of distress, we will stop immediately." They returned to the testing room. It was even more crowded than before. Word had spread about the new test, and scientists had come from all over the station to watch. Some had even traveled from nearby planets. Everyone wanted to see the human girl face the impossible puzzle. Yuna was already sitting in her chair when they arrived. Kira stood beside her, looking worried. She had heard rumors about what was happening today. "Miss Kira, is everything okay?" Yuna asked. "I hope so," Kira said quietly. She looked at Director Omal. "Is this test safe?" "We will be watching every moment," Director Omal said. "If there is any danger, we will stop." Kira did not look satisfied, but she nodded. She trusted the director mostly, and she trusted Yuna. Professor Vell placed the crystal disc on the table. When he touched it, the disc projected a complex pattern into the air. It was different from the other puzzles. This one seemed to move and change on its own, like a living thing. The shapes twisted and folded into each other endlessly. "This is called the infinite loop," Professor Vell explained. His voice was serious. "It is a recursive logic problem. That means it repeats itself in ways that seem impossible. The puzzle has no obvious solution. It is designed to measure how long a mind can persist before giving up." Yuna looked at the twisting shapes. Her eyes followed their movements. "What happens if I cannot solve it?" "Then you stop," Director Omal said gently. "There is no shame in stopping. Many great minds have been unable to complete this test. The point is not to solve it. The point is to see how you think." Yuna nodded. "Okay, I will try my best." She focused on the puzzle. The room went silent. Everyone watched. 1 minute passed. The shapes continued their endless dance. Yuna did not move. She just watched. 2 minutes. Kira began to feel nervous. She had seen Yuna solve puzzles quickly before. This long silence was unusual. 3 minutes. Professor Vell felt something like satisfaction. Perhaps this was finally a puzzle that would humble the human child. Perhaps this would prove that humans had limits after all. Then Yuna spoke. "This puzzle is broken," she said. Everyone stirred. Professor Vell leaned forward. "What do you mean, broken?" Yuna pointed at a specific part of the pattern. "There. That part does not fit. It goes against the rules that the rest of the puzzle follows. At first I thought I was wrong, but I checked 3 times. That part is different on purpose." She looked up at Professor Vell with curious eyes. "The puzzle does not want me to solve it. It wants me to find the question it is really asking." The room went very quiet. Director Omal slowly stood up from her chair. "What question is it asking?" she said. Yuna thought for a moment, then she smiled. "The question is, why would someone make a puzzle that cannot be solved? The answer is, because the puzzle is not really a puzzle. It is a message." She pointed at the broken part of the pattern again. "If you take that part out and look at it by itself, it makes a different shape. That shape is the real answer. The rest of the puzzle is just there to hide it." She reached out and touched the broken part. Instantly, the pattern changed. The endless motion stopped. All the shapes rearranged themselves and a single symbol appeared in the center. The symbol was from an ancient language. It meant congratulations. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Professor Vell's datapad slipped from his appendages and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the silent room. Director Omal walked slowly toward the table. She stared at the symbol for a long time. Then she looked at Yuna. 300 years, she said. "This puzzle has existed for 300 years. Thousands of the brightest minds in the galaxy have attempted it. Some of them spent years trying to understand it. Some of them broke their minds trying. And none of them found the hidden message." Yuna looked up at her. Were they looking for a message? "No," Director Omal admitted. "They were trying to solve it. They assumed it was a normal puzzle with a normal solution. They never considered that the puzzle itself was the clue." "Oh," Yuna shrugged. "I always look for tricks. My mom says that is how I think. She says my brain looks for the thing that does not fit." Professor Vell had picked up his datapad. His appendages were shaking slightly. "She found an Easter egg," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "The creator of this puzzle hid something inside it 300 years ago. a secret that no one ever discovered, and a human child found it in 3 minutes. Kira put her arm around Yuna protectively. Is the test over now? Director Omel nodded slowly. Yes, the test is over. She looked at Yuna with new eyes. You are not what we expected, little one. You are something else entirely. Yuna did not understand what the director meant. She was tired now and a little confused by all the attention. Can I go rest now? That puzzle made my head feel full. Of course, Director Omel said. Rest well, you have earned it. Kira led Yuna out of the room. The observers parted to let them pass, watching the small human girl with expressions of shock, wonder, and perhaps a little fear. After they left, Professor Vel stood alone with Director Omel. The symbol still glowed in the air above the table, its congratulations meant for no one for 3 centuries until today. What do we do now? Professor Vel asked. Director Omel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, we learn, we study, and we remember this day. She looked at the door where Yuna had gone. Because I believe we have just witnessed something very important, not just about that child but about her entire species. Humans think differently than we do. They do not just solve problems, they question the problems themselves. Professor Vel clicked his shell softly. Is that a good thing or a dangerous thing? Director Omel did not answer for a long time. Perhaps, she finally said, it is both. The news spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone on the station was talking about the human girl who had solved the infinite loop. Within days, the story had traveled to 100 different planets. Scientists, scholars, and leaders from across the galaxy wanted to know more about this small child from a small planet called Earth. Yuna did not understand why everyone was so interested in her. She was just a kid who liked puzzles. Back home, she was not famous. She was just Yuna, the girl who always finished her puzzle books too quickly. But here, on this space station, she had become something more. She had become a mystery that the whole galaxy wanted to solve. Professor Vel did not go to bed that night. Instead, he locked himself in his study and began to research. He pulled up every piece of information about humans that existed in the galactic database. He read about their history. He studied their biology. He examined their psychology. He learned about their planet, their cultures, and their evolution. The more he read, the more his shell clicked with surprise. Humans had evolved on a planet called Earth. It was a small world, covered mostly in water. It seemed pleasant at first, but as Professor Vel read deeper, he began to understand something that changed everything. Earth was a death world. The planet was full of predators. Large animals with sharp teeth hunted in the forests. Poisonous insects crawled through the grass. Diseases spread through the water and air. The weather was violent and unpredictable. Floods, storms, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions happened regularly. The temperature changed with the seasons, forcing creatures to constantly adapt. And in this chaos, humans had survived. They had no claws, no armor, no venom. They were soft and slow compared to the predators that hunted them. But they had one thing that made them different: their brains. Human brains had evolved to solve problems fast, very fast. When a predator appeared, humans had to think quickly. Should they run? Should they hide? Should they fight? Should they climb a tree? Should they throw a rock? Every situation required a different answer, and there was no time to think slowly. Generation after generation, the humans who thought fastest survived. The ones who could see patterns, predict danger, and find solutions lived long enough to have children. And those children were even better at thinking. Professor Vel leaned back in his chair. His compound eyes reflected the glow of his screen. They did not evolve to be scholars, he whispered to himself. They evolved to survive. Every puzzle is a predator to them. Every problem is a threat that must be conquered before it conquers them. He thought about Yuna sitting in that chair, calmly solving puzzles that had defeated the greatest minds in the galaxy. She had not looked stressed. She had not looked worried. She had looked like she was playing a game. Because to a human, that was exactly what puzzles were. Games. Simulations of survival. Their brains were designed to attack problems with everything they had, because in their history, a slow answer meant death. The next morning, Professor Vell went to find Yuna and Kira. They were in a small garden area on the station, surrounded by plants from many different worlds. Yuna was looking at a strange flower that changed colors when she touched it. Professor Vell, Yuna said happily, look at this flower, it knows I am touching it. Professor Vell looked at the flower. Then he looked at Yuna. His tall, insectoid body seemed less stiff today. His shell had stopped clicking nervously. May I sit with you? He asked. Kira nodded and made room on the bench. Professor Vell folded his long legs beneath him and settled down. I have been studying your species, he said. I wanted to understand how you think. Did you learn anything? Kira asked. Yes. Professor Vell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I was wrong about humans. I thought you were simple because your technology is young. I did not understand that your minds are old, very old, shaped by millions of years of survival. He looked at Yuna. You do not solve puzzles the way we do. We approach problems calmly and systematically. We take our time because we have always had time. Our ancestors evolved on peaceful worlds where danger was rare. But you, he continued, you attack problems. Your brain treats every puzzle like a predator that must be defeated. You do not think about the problem, you feel it. You react to it. Your subconscious mind works faster than your conscious mind because it had to. Yuna listened carefully, but she did not fully understand. Is that bad? No, Professor Vell surprised himself with how quickly he answered. It is not bad, it is different, and it is remarkable. He lowered himself even more, bringing his great insectoid face closer to Yuna's level. In his culture, this was a sign of deep respect. It was how elders spoke to those they honored. I have been a teacher for 300 years, he said. In all that time, I have never met a mind like yours. I came to this assessment expecting to see a primitive species fail simple tests. Instead, I have seen something that has changed how I understand intelligence itself. Yuna smiled, so I did good. Professor Vell made a sound that might have been a laugh. This time it was a kind sound. Yes, little one, you did very good. Later that day, Director Omel called a meeting. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in a large conference room. Holographic screens showed the faces of leaders and scientists from dozens of worlds. The human child has passed every test we have given her, Director Omel announced. She has exceeded all expectations. She has solved puzzles that we believed were unsolvable. One child proves nothing, said a representative from the Krell species. She could be special, a mutation, not representative of her kind. That is possible, Professor Vell said. He stood up to address the room. But I have researched human evolution. Their entire species developed under conditions that selected for rapid problem-solving. If this child is exceptional among humans, imagine what their truly gifted individuals must be capable of. This is concerning, said another representative. If humans can think this way, they could be dangerous. In 100 years, what might they become? They could be dangerous, Director Omel agreed. Or they could be our greatest allies. Think about it. A species that attacks problems. A species that does not accept defeat. A species that looks at the impossible and asks, how do I beat this? She looked around the room at all the worried faces. For thousands of years, we have faced challenges that seemed unsolvable, wars that never ended, diseases we could not cure, scientific mysteries we could not unravel. What if we had partners who thought differently than us? Partners who could look at our problems with fresh eyes and find solutions we never imagined. The room was silent as everyone considered her words. I am not saying we should trust them completely, Director Olmo continued. I am saying we should give them a chance. We should watch them, guide them, learn from them even as they learn from us. Professor Vell nodded. I agree. I came to this station believing humans were lesser beings. I was wrong. Their minds work in ways we do not fully understand yet, but that is exactly why we should study them more closely. And what about the child? Someone asked. Director Olmo smiled. The child will go home, she will live her life, she will grow up, and perhaps one day she will return to this station as an adult. I would very much like to see what she becomes. Far away from the conference room, Yuna was taking a nap in her quarters. She dreamed of puzzles and stars and strange new worlds waiting to be explored. She had no idea that important beings were discussing the future of her entire species because of her. She was just a 7-year-old girl who liked puzzles. But sometimes, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The final day on the station arrived faster than Yuna expected. She had gotten used to the floating lights, the strange foods, and the aliens who stared at her wherever she went. Part of her did not want to leave. But another part of her missed home. She missed her parents. She missed her room full of puzzle books. She even missed her annoying older brother who always tried to solve her puzzles before she could. Kira helped her pack her small bag. They did not have much to bring. Just some clothes, a few gifts from friendly aliens, and one special thing, a small crystal that Professor Vell had given her. When you held it up to the light, it showed tiny galaxies spinning inside. Are you ready to go home? Kira asked. Yuna nodded, but she looked a little sad. I wish I could stay longer. There are so many puzzles here I have not tried yet. Kira smiled. I think you will be invited back someday. They walked through the hallways of the station one last time. Aliens stopped to watch them pass. Some bowed their heads. Some waved their appendages. Some made sounds that Yuna's translator said were words of respect and farewell. Before they reached the docking bay, Director Olmo's assistant stopped them. The director wishes to see you before you leave, the assistant said. There is an important ceremony. Yuna looked up at Kira with confusion. Ceremony. Kira shrugged. She did not know what was happening either. They followed the assistant to the grand hall. It was the largest room on the station, with a ceiling so high it looked like an indoor sky. Thousands of beings had gathered there. They filled the seats and the balconies and even floated in the air near the ceiling. At the center of the hall was a raised platform. Director Olmo stood there in her finest robes. Professor Vell stood beside her, and behind them, on a massive screen, was a live broadcast that reached every planet in the Galactic Council. What is happening? Yuna whispered. I think you are about to find out, Kira said. They were led to the platform. Yuna climbed the steps with her short legs, feeling very small among all these important beings. Kira stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder for comfort. Director Olmo raised all 4 of her arms for silence. The hall went quiet instantly. Today we gather for a moment of great significance, she announced. Her voice was carried throughout the station and beyond to billions of ears across the galaxy. 7 days ago, a ship arrived carrying a representative of a species called humans. They are from a small planet called Earth in a distant part of the galaxy. They have only recently joined the stars. She paused and looked at Yuna. When they arrived, humans were classified as a Class 7 civilization. This is the lowest classification we give to species that have achieved basic space travel. It means they are considered young, primitive, and unimportant in galactic affairs. Yuna did not like those words. They sounded mean, but she stayed quiet. However, Director Olmo continued, the young human who stands before you has changed everything we believed about her species. The screen behind her showed recordings of Yuna solving puzzles, the logic cube, the pattern matrix, the spatial hologram, the infinite loop. Each success was displayed for the entire galaxy to see. This child solved puzzles that were designed for the greatest minds among us. She completed tests that had defeated scholars with centuries of experience. She found secrets hidden in challenges that had stumped us for 300 years. The crowd murmured. Some species made sounds of amazement. Others clicked or hummed or flashed colors of surprise. Director almost smiled. I have called an emergency reclassification council. For the first time in galactic history, a species will jump multiple levels based on cognitive evaluation rather than technological advancement. She turned to face the screen, where the faces of council members from 100 worlds watched. By unanimous vote of the council, humanity is hereby reclassified. She paused for effect. They are no longer Class 7. They are now classified as a Class 2 emerging civilization. This is a leap of 5 levels in a single day. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some gasped. Some argued loudly with their neighbors. This had never happened before. Species usually took thousands of years to climb even one level. Humanity had just jumped 5 in 1 week. Yuna tugged on Kira's sleeve. Is that good? Kira had tears in her eyes. Yes, Yuna, that is very good. Professor Vel stepped forward. The crowd slowly quieted again. I want to say something, he announced. His voice was different now. It was no longer cold and dismissive. It was warm and honest. When the human ship arrived, I looked down on them. I believed they were simple creatures from a simple world. I expected them to fail every test. I wanted them to fail because it would prove what I already believed. He paused and looked at Yuna. I was wrong. I was foolish and arrogant, and this small child taught me a lesson I will never forget. He knelt down. His great insectoid body lowered itself until his compound eyes were level with Yuna's face. In Torani culture, this was the highest sign of respect. It meant he saw her as his equal. Humans are not dangerous because they are aggressive, he said, speaking to Yuna but loud enough for everyone to hear. They are remarkable because they adapt. They do not accept problems, they attack them. They do not see limits, they see challenges. And they do not give up until they find a way through. He stood again and addressed the crowd. In 300 years of teaching, I have never met a species so eager to learn and so capable of understanding. I believe humanity will become one of the great civilizations of this galaxy, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of their minds. Director Omel nodded. Thank you, Professor. She looked at Yuna. Little one, do you have anything to say? Yuna thought about it. Thousands of aliens were watching her. Billions more were watching on screens across the galaxy. She was just 7 years old. What could she possibly say that would matter? Then she smiled and spoke from her heart. Thank you for letting me do puzzles with you. They were really fun. And thank you for being nice to me, even though I am small and human. I hope I can come back someday and do more puzzles. She paused, then added, My mom says that when you work hard and try your best, good things happen. I think she is right. Everyone here tried to understand me, and I tried to understand the puzzles. Maybe that is what being friends is about, trying to understand each other. The hall was silent. Then slowly the applause began. It grew and grew until it filled the entire station. Beings of every shape and size clapped their hands, tentacles, appendages, or whatever they had. Some made sounds of joy. Some flashed bright colors. Some simply nodded with deep respect. A 7-year-old human girl had just given the best speech the Grand Hall had ever heard. Later, as Yuna and Kira boarded the shuttle to return home, Professor Vel came to say goodbye. I will miss you, little one, he said. You have changed how I see the universe. Yuna hugged one of his long legs. I will miss you too, Professor. Thank you for the crystal galaxy. As the shuttle lifted off, Yuna pressed her face against the window one more time. She watched the great station grow smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny point of light among the stars. Miss Kira, she said. Yes. Do you think they will invite us back?" Kira smiled and put her arm around the small girl who had just changed the fate of humanity. "I think," she said, "they will be begging us to come back." Yuna smiled and closed her eyes. She dreamed of puzzles and stars and a future full of wonders. She was just a 7-year-old girl from Earth. But she had shown the galaxy that being human was something special. And this was only the beginning.